What's going on, everyone? It's your boy, Chris Cleve from the Black Business Initiative. And today we have Black Dollar Saturday. Our Black Dollar Saturday is finally live and we are back in person. We finally made it back down to Brother Jeff's Cultural Center, where you can come down if you are not only in need but in want. I always tell people that you have to be intentional about understanding what other people's situations are, but at the same time, it's okay to be in want. It's okay to stop by and grab some Campbell's soup if you need it. It's okay to grab some toilet paper if you need it. It's one of those things where that's exactly what this place is for. So without further ado, today we have Dr. Sean Mccoon, who will be not only be helping us with different strategies, but also letting us know about her story, where she sees herself going from here, the entrepreneurship role, but also, the importance of mental health and developing and having these strategies to have this work and home life balance, and that's something that I think, just us in the Black community is kind of tough because we're always on the go, always running around, always chasing a bag. What the young people say nowadays is chasing that bag. So it's like you have to understand and put yourself in a situation where you're taking care of you and you're putting yourself first. And not only are you looking forward to making yourself feel better, but the intention to feel better. So I'm not going to keep talking. I'm going to let you talk because I know that's what we're here for. And like I said, thank you for coming because I do know how important this is. And I do know how crazy your schedule is as well. So I thank you for giving us the opportunity to even ask you some questions. So I'll give you this time to kind of introduce yourself to the world and to our following, and we can move forward.
Okay, so first of all, he said a whole lot of stuff. I don't know if we're going to get to all of that at this particular time, but we'll see what we get to. So as he said, I'm Dr. Sean Mccoon. I am the Executive Director for Higher Learning U, which creates safe spaces and healthy spaces for learning throughout the country. So I do different training and coaching for different people, schools, organizations across the country. But I'm also the CEO of the Black Home Ownership Project, which is a national project to create wealth, create sustainable wealth nationally, starting with home ownership. So those are some of the things that I do. And I'm a national board certified mental health therapist. So I do a lot of stuff around creating healthy systems, mental health supports, those kind of things.
That's amazing. I think even when you and I first spoke, that was really it. Like it was the understanding that you do everything.
Oh Lord!
But
they
all work together, and that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's like they all intertwine. I think what people don't understand is that being an entrepreneur, sometimes, especially when you're successful, right? Like you start speaking to other business owners and you start to feel like, all right, well, I'm giving this person advice and I'm giving that person advice, but then you're also open to advice as well.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, how's my marketing? How should my marketing be better? How can I move forward? How can I take my business to the next level?
Yeah.
So one of the questions is, tell us about yourself and what drives you to do what you do.
So ultimately, God drives me to do what I do because what He allows me to see are challenges, and I think He has blessed me with that ability of discernment and vision because of some of the things, right, that I've gone through. I am the product of the South Side of Chicago, Inglewood, to be specific.
Okay.
So Inglewood up to no good, no. That's what we say on the South Side, but. Okay. And so just seeing a lot of things, right? So gangs, actually was involved in gangs myself in high school. Most people feel like, when I say that to kids, they're like, you, Dr. Q? Yes, babe, me. So a lot of that, some homelessness, some different challenges growing up on the South Side of Chicago, but God blessed me to be able to attend college, undergrad, certifications, doctorates, a lot of hard work, but all blessings from the Lord. And so I think all of those experiences opened my eyes up to a lot of things that especially Black people experience. And in each of those spaces, God says to do something. And so I just do it. And then He provides the information, the resources, and all that to make it happen. But one of the things I wanted to share that I do that I actually didn't mention before was the African American Young Ladies Summit program.
Okay.
And so started that when I worked in Denver Public Schools. And what happened was I got to see a lot of data in Denver Public Schools that really showed that Black girls were struggling. And no one was talking about it. I mean, I love my Black men, amazing husband sitting right there. And I know that Black men are a rare species, right? And a target in a lot of ways. But so are Black girls. And no one was talking about it. And the data told me that social emotionally, they were really struggling, and academically as well. And so started the African American Young Ladies Program in 2017. And it has grown global.
Absolutely.
So we work with girls in Uganda, California, Florida, Texas, Seattle, like all over the place.
That's amazing.
So, and the virtual space has given us the opportunity to do so. So I just want to make sure, AAYLS, I didn't forget you. You're amazing. So.
And what I mean, I guess, you know, just the people who are here, right? I mean, one of the good things, I wouldn't even say good, but one of the things about having opportunity, right? And being blessed with opportunity is that you allow yourself to kind of open up to the world. You start off with small circles. You start off with people that you see in front of you that need help. But then it's just like, obviously you have to be intentional about it, right? Like you just running out there and just saying, hey, I want to help every single person. It's not, it's not an achievable goal. Or, I mean, it may be achievable to some people, but it's not. I always tell people, like, make attainable goals. You know what I mean? And I know, like, so let's talk more about your experience in the public school, because I mean, that must have opened your eyes to a lot of different things.
So my experience in a public school started as a substitute teacher. Actually, before my oldest was born, and she's 20, she'll be 24. And then I was a school counselor. An assistant principal, and then a principal. I actually, for those people who are here in Denver, I was an assistant principal at TJ and at Lincoln. And then we moved to Oakland, and I did principalships there. And just have had just a diverse experience around small schools, huge schools, and schools with very diverse populations. And just thought, I think we should do a reality TV show in high school. I don't know if any kids would actually attend high school after people really saw what went on in high schools, because there's so much craziness going on in the schools. So in some ways, the virtual space could have been a blessing to some people. But anyway, that's an aside. That's a whole nother show. But yeah, so hopefully I answered your question.
No, yeah, you did. I guess the only thing that I would, also add or ask is, how were you able to, especially being in the public schools, and I think I ask this all the time because I've worked in the school as well. How do you turn it on and off? I mean, we're talking about strategies, right? Like we're talking about entrepreneurship, but it's like the hardest thing for me was to see kids, Black kids, grow up the way that I did and understand and know like their struggles. And then when I leave work, there's really no more ways to help. So it's like, how do you turn it off? And I ask this to therapists, I ask this to psychiatrists all the time. How do you turn it off? When you leave the office, how do you turn it off?
So I don't know that you do turn it off. I think that you focus in different ways. So like for me, I started the girls program. And that enabled me to build deeper relationships with young ladies and be a part of their family in a sense, right? So I take girls to camp. We went up to the YMCA at the Rockies, and we hung out, and we did some leadership development, and we just were Black girls, like we had fun. We went skating, we roller skating, ice skating, we did tubing. We developed some processes for leadership, because it's a leadership conference. And so what were the girls going to do in their community, and when they got back home. So for me, it's not about turning off. It's kind of like refocusing. But as far if you're asking, how do I take care of myself? So I take care of myself by staying aligned with my purpose.
Okay.
And then resting when I need to. Although my family would say I don't do that well enough.
Got you.
But I take baths. I love baths. Like if you want me to be resting and relaxing, run me up, some bath water. And that's one of my mental health strategies. I think some of the other strategies that I've seen that works is just surrounding myself with people who get me. Safe spaces where I can be honest, where I don't have to fight anymore, because you can be in spaces where people are constantly challenging you, constantly kind of judging you and stuff like that, but creating spaces where you feel comfortable and you don't feel like you have to be a certain kind of way. You can let your hair down and just be yourself.
Absolutely.
I think another strategy that has worked for me is breathing.
Okay.
And I know that sounds really crazy. And as a mental health therapist, I thought that sounded kind of hinky, kind of kumbaya to breathe. But a lot of times we don't realize that we're shallow breathing most of the time because of our stress.
All the time.
And it's just like, we're like I say to someone, breathe. Like my husband sometimes breathe. And he's like, I don't breathe. Or else I'll pass out, whatever. But when we really deeply breathe, we just take a minute and just breathe and be conscious of our air going into our body and what the oxygen does to us. It really recalibrates our brain and it enables us to show up better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really want this to be interactive, guys. So if you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask Dr. McCoon, we're talking about strategies. I think everybody deals with mental health differently. I think that everyone, like me, my purpose sometimes, if I wake up with bad energy, I'm not going to lie. Like the first thing I go to is my yoga mat. And I don't practice yoga all the time. But what I do know and understand is that what it does for me is it centers me.
Yes.
It brings me back to where I need to be. And a lot of the times I think we stress ourselves out over things that we have no control over.
Yes, most of the time.
Like no control over. And it's like sometimes, and I tell people this all the time, during the pandemic, what it really did for me or for a lot of people, that mirror no longer was a mirror that you walked by. That mirror ended up being a mirror that you had to look into. And it's like, wow, who am I? What am I? What purpose do I have? And why am I here? I think we all chase a dollar. We all chase a bag.
Got to pay bills.
And at the end of the day, sometimes we lose ourselves in that.
Yeah.
And I think what happens for a lot of people is they realized, all right, as much as I love going to the office, as much as I love going to the gym, I was really just moving. Exactly. And I didn't give myself a chance to finally catch up.
Yes.
And then when I did catch up, it was a dark hole. Yeah. Because it was somewhere where I had to look at myself and say, is this really where I am? Is this really what I'm doing? Am I only being intentional about the dollar? So I would ask the audience, is there some things that you guys like to do that, kind of centers you and brings you back to who you feel like you need to be?
Or helps you manage your stress? Okay, beyond the drinking, beyond the smoking. Okay, beyond that, because we all know those are legal, and as adults, we can definitely do that. But sometimes that actually equates avoiding the stress and not dealing with it, right? So what do we do? What do you do to deal with your stress? Don't have me pick on you, because I will pick on people. Yes, dear.
I like to take deep breaths throughout the day. There are some conscious breathing exercises that I like to do, like breath in, breath hold, and 4 breaths out.
Okay. Some breathing practices: 4 breaths in, hold, and breathe out. Which would drive me crazy, but it works for you, right? And that's good. Anyone else?
And it's also intentional.
Yes, it's very intentional.
Very intentional.
And being aligned with who you are. Was that?
I do. It's a book that I read.
Book of Awakening.
Yes.
Okay.
It has a message for you.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
And it's I find especially lately I have to come back to that because I can let everything else go. Read that passage, and at the end of it, you are breathing. It tells you, it gives you
Oh, good. Okay.
Absolutely.
And that kind of, wow,
Yeah.
then I can go to sleep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that,
Okay.
Absolutely.
I really feel
And it helps you to rest better.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Absolutely.
I'm really thinking that now I need to take that a little bit further, especially because I teach.
Yes.
And I don't, in the middle of the day, I find myself always working.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I need to let that go.
Mhm.
That work will always be there,
Mhm.
and I need to let that go so I can get prepared for my next.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking if I take that to the middle of my day and set it there, then I can carry on.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
How about starting it at the beginning of your day?
You know what? I thought.
Because so I start my day off with prayer and Bible study every morning. And it just helps me. Even when I'm struggling, I'll tell God, like, I'm struggling. I am tense. I am anxious today. I need you to carry this today, right? And so sometimes just starting that off, acknowledging where you are, kind of like a self-assessment, and then getting into your practice can be really healthy. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say that was my next thought. Oh, maybe it should be at the beginning of the day. But then in actuality, it should probably be every time you feel.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Doing throughout the day, because stuff pops up, right? Different triggers, different things that happen that put us in a certain space.
Absolutely.
That's actually one of the approaches for you. So
Yep.
at the drop of a hat, it was very tense, it was very anxious.
Absolutely.
Have you ever done that in conversation and people think you're crazy? It's like, what is she doing?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, some of the things that, I do intentionally is affirmations early in the morning.
Mhm.
Daily affirmations, like, what do I want to achieve today? Like, even if it's something small, I started targeting, like, I really started just giving myself like strategies and saying, I want to start brushing my teeth twice a day. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's something as
Are you
small
breathing
as
while you're brushing your teeth?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
But it's like today I want to eat 2 apples, or today I want to eat healthy, or
good
today, you know what I mean,
practices, yeah.
or today I don't want to order out.
Okay.
So that means my intention when I wake up is take some meat out the refrigerator.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, make sure that I'm sticking to some of these plans that I'm actually putting aside for myself.
Yeah. One of the strategies that work really well for me, I don't know if it'll work for you all, but just to think about things that work for you, is that I actually write a list of the things that I need to get done. And the reason why it takes the stress off of it is because I don't have to remember it. It doesn't have to race around on the cycle in my brain, right? And so I can write it down. And I'm blessed to have a whiteboard. So I get to go erase it when I'm done.
Absolutely.
But until I'm done, it stays there. But I don't have to remember. It doesn't necessarily have to stay here, right? Or here. It's on the board. And so I can just erase it. I know some people have a list that they do and they check it off and they feel so good. Once that is checked off, it's like amazing.
Absolutely.
So that's a great strategy. Another thing I do is I walk with my husband. We walk sometimes twice a day. And since during COVID, lunch, we eat lunch, we go for a walk. After dinner, we go for a walk. And so that's a huge stress reliever, not just for the exercise, because it's great, but we also get to debrief what happened that day, right? And kind of download and kind of do some problem solving and some just breathing, right? And support each other.
Absolutely.
As we walk. And that's the other thing, especially for Black business owners. We need to support each other. One of the biggest stress relievers we can have is a network of support. Where we also don't feel judged, but we feel supported, where we can say, okay, I had a really wonderful, amazing, powerful Black woman say last week, I just can't take it anymore. This is just too much. Like, I didn't believe this is how this is going to be, right? And so just being able to say those kind of things and have other people say, but I'm here for you. What do you need to do?
Absolutely.
Right. And that's super, super important. And we don't do that enough as a Black community. And we need not just people who are verbally supportive, but also who have skills.
Absolutely.
Who can support us. So if you're great with creating apps and computers or music, and you're great with communication, like, we need to be able to say, what you need, I got you, right? And
Absolutely.
pitch in and help each other. Because a lot of times as Black business owners, we do everything. We do absolutely everything. And unfortunately, sometimes we do it too well. And people think that we're superhuman, right? And what we need to be okay with is that we're not, and we do need the help and we need the support. And that doesn't mean that we're less than, because other people who are not Black, they get all of that.
Absolutely.
Right? And they've gotten it historically from the womb, even before the womb. You know what I'm saying? They have that support. We have friends that say, you know, their kids are 5 and they've already gotten college paid for because that's the village that they belong to. And so we need to create those villages, right, for ourselves, because if we don't, who will?
Absolutely.
And if we don't do it now, when will it be done?
Absolutely.
Will we keep waiting and waiting and waiting for someone else to do it? You know, and then be in the same situation we're in today, like struggling, you know, having nervous breakdowns, and we're going to get medication from the doctor. And most of it is just we feel alone. We don't have the support we need. You know, we don't have the information. We don't have a space so we can just be like, girl, I'm struggling. You know, this is too hard. Why do I have to do it all by myself?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And I think that is important, right? You know, I think it's the conversation of who's there to help me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, who's there to listen? Like, everyone asks me, they're always just like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. But like, think about it. Like, when you ask someone how they're doing, like, are you
really
asking it?
know?
Yeah. Are you asking it
'Cause I'll
intentionally?
tell you.
Like, are you asking it super intentionally? Because you will really be surprised that if you asked how you're doing to someone with actual intent, someone would probably be willing to talk to you and really tell you how they're doing if they're really feeling some type of way.
Yeah.
And I've encountered that a lot. And I say I encounter it more with children.
Yeah.
I really encounter it with children. And I used to be super intentional about when I used to work in middle schools and elementary schools. How you doing? How was your day? How was your night? And you'd be surprised how fast a kid will tell you, I'm not happy today.
Right.
I don't feel good today. You'd be surprised. But what happens is as Black people, I think we start to feel weak if we tell someone we're having a bad day.
Yes.
We start to feel weak if we tell someone we're sad.
Right.
You know, I live with intent. Like, if I'm sad, you're going to see that I'm sad.
Okay, well, you make sure you tell.
And I'm going to tell someone. and it's only because, you know, I understand that people are willing to listen.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised at who would listen.
So let me say something to that. Sometimes we have people in our lives that aren't willing to listen. And we need to be aware of those people too, that aren't really listening. They want to kind of give you advice or they want to judge you. And I'm saying that not in the sense that that's their intent, but they're not also intentionally just listening, right? Not listening to find fault or to judge, or you should have done that, girl, why'd you do that? Or man, bro, you know you should have done that differently. But they don't really know how to create that safe space where you can just be and not worry about being judged or corrected, right? And so we need to practice kind of building that community for each other where we don't have to feel judged. And if we have people in our lives that are like that, then you know you just don't pour your whole heart. You just go, okay, so I'll go talk to these friends, right? Because I know I can share and not be judged. Because sometimes we walk away from conversations with our friends and we feel heavier. Because now we're taking on the fact, I don't even like you right now. Because not only could I not open my heart up and share what's going on, but you didn't listen. And now I'm angry at you on top of the problems that I had before I started talking. Right. And so now you're carrying that. And it's like, oh gosh, you know, like we need more burdens to carry.
Absolutely.
So creating safe, healthy spaces where we can just listen and be human and be Black humans, which is a whole nother level, is super important.
Do we have any questions from anyone? Go ahead.
So I know this answer for me, but in terms of a broader question, where do people learn to listen? And where do people learn to have emotional intelligence? And where do people learn how to, when asked sincerely, how do you feel? How does a person know how they feel? Particularly in a culture that all of that was suppressed and denied.
Sounds like a sermon, my brother.
Where and how?
So one, I think a lot of it comes from experience. I think some of it comes from, man, I felt crappy when I left this conversation. And so you engage in a sort of self-awareness of what do I want to be for the person who comes to me, right? In that same space. So if you have some kind of self-awareness, then you try to kind of, and I would say God speaks to you and say, you don't want to be that person that just was that way for you, so be better. I think that's just one thing that kind of, I think it's something that troubles our spirit to say, I want to be something different than what I just experienced. That's one thing. The other, there's trainings, right, that you can do. I do trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive trainings nationally, where I actually teach people to listen, but also to have self-awareness questions prepared. Like, if you know yourself and like, like I'm quick to judge, or I'm quick to take on that person's problems, right? Like, and Kara, you talk about cutting stuff off, so I know that's your issue. And so that requires self-awareness too. How do I support, but know that this person's ultimately responsible for the outcomes of their lives, right? So that comes from wisdom, discernment, grace, experience, and training. But I'd love to hear from you other ideas.
I mean, I grew up in a community that was a community, and I think that there's another generation, perhaps in this room, that never grew up in a Black community.
Absolutely.
They've never seen Black excellence everywhere, and Black accountability.
Yes.
And Black care and compassion, to where now there's a society, particularly in Colorado, where you see Black folks in passing.
And sometimes they don't even speak.
Yeah.
They like, eye contact.
So when I was raised, there was a relationship between the elders and the youth.
Yes.
And there were some rules attached to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so those were some learned kind of
within community.
What you couldn't do, and what you had to hide and do if you wanted to kind of do some of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then also, I come from a part of the community where there was initiation, so I know the difference between an initiated man and woman, as opposed to the differences. So
like a rites of passage type of situation?
Rites, more than rites, but straight initiation.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
Like, and not even from a religious standpoint, but what that means is if you saw that movie Mandela.
Yep.
And you saw that bonfire at the beginning of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I was in South Africa on a couple of occasions, and I could see what was happening in that scene. And what this is there's an initiation where the men take the boy, and the other communities have it, bar mitzvahs,
yes.
quinceañeras,
quinceañeras. Yes.
But what's happening in that movie is the men came to get the boys, and when the boy is leaving, he's going to come back a man.
Yes.
So all of the stuff he used to play with as a boy was put in a bonfire.
Oh,
Because when he returns, none of that will be there anymore.
Right.
Because you're a man, and then the woman knows an initiated man, and if you're not initiated, you can't be with a woman because it's a violation for a woman to sleep with a boy.
Yep.
Yes. Oh my goodness, so that's a whole nother.
All of these levels of understanding happen in different places, but were denied us.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so the follow-up question that I see, and some of the frustrations I see, is that we have leaders in our community that have gone through something. They've either been shot, or they've been incarcerated, or they've been sexually abused, they've been molested, they've gone through all of that type of rites of passage, and then they come in the community to help because they've been through that,
right?
Yep.
But they've never addressed
those
trauma
traumas
attached to that.
Absolutely.
So we've got leaders that are able to be leaders, but they're basically healing themselves by traumatizing
everyone else
around them.
Yeah.
And so you start seeing this bouncing around from organization to organization, starting a group, and the more charismatic that person is, it gives them a larger platform. to continue hurting and harming, within the community, all because of unchecked trauma.
Yep.
And you saw that in the movie Wakanda, the kill bomber.
Yep.
Yes.
He
Yes.
had all of the kill signs on him.
Yep.
And he was leading from
A wounded place.
Yeah.
wounded
Absolutely.
place. And the
Absolutely.
first thing he did was jumped on the woman, elder,
Yep.
right by the magic of the community,
Mm-hmm.
and it burned it down.
Yep.
And so I guess the point I'm making is we should know some of those different things and have eldership that guides us through some of these difficult periods of our life.
Mm-hmm.
And it will eliminate some of that stress, and it begins with the ability to listen.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I love the richness of that. Thank you.
I guess to follow up on that, right? It's you talked about unchecked trauma. How do you feel? Why is it so hard? And I don't only say for Black men, right? Why is it so hard? Like, what is the stigma behind going to see a therapist? What is the stigma behind, talking to a psychiatrist, talking to a therapist? Because it's like, I feel like it's always been, you're crazy. Like, because you go see someone, something's wrong with you. But sometimes it's really, being able to be heard.
Yeah. Someone who's neutral and that you don't have to worry about them not being there just to listen. I would actually lean into what Brother Jeff said. I think some of it is that we have been so wounded and we don't have people in our community that have set an example of healing. I think in other Native cultures, they actually create space for healing where people can come and whether it's a sweat lodge and sweat out some of those impurities, and other ways, whether it's hunting, whether it's some kind of whatever, right? And even some of those rites of passage pieces create spaces for healing some of those wounds. And we heal faster in community. And we don't have community. So when you brought that up, it's interesting. I was working with a group of African-American girls and women over at Hamilton Middle School. And the Spirit just told me to ask this question as part of our session: what community do you belong to? And so the young ladies listed different communities, starting with their families and different things they do out in the community. Not one said the Black community. Not one girl or woman. And so then when I shared and I, said the Black community, you could see they were all like, oh my gosh, I didn't say that. I wonder why they, you could see them and then one of the girls said, Dr. McCune, you just dropped the bomb on us. We don't even know how to talk about it, And I was like, so why do you think nobody said the Black community but me? And they were like, I don't know. I said, well, let's talk about what community means and why you haven't defined yourself as part of the Black community. And so it was just deep, right? And it was just they were like, oh my gosh, this was life-changing, which I didn't think so, but I felt like we needed to talk about the fact that we actually don't connect as a Black community. And that is, when I teach trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive work, if you heal as part of a community because you need that space. And when I talked about a safe place where you're not judged and those kind of things, that's community.
Absolutely.
Right? Where you're supported in community, whatever way we define community. But when we're talking about the larger Black community, we're quick to fight. We're quick to stand up against something. But what are we standing up for? And when do we stand up for each other? Right? And what would that even look like? What would it even look like to stand up for each other? You want to say?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna, as you're saying that, it reminds me that I actually wanna thank Brother Jeff for providing a space for community.
Yeah.
And so when you said those young ladies did identify themselves with the Black community. Some of that is the absence of what he talked about because we aren't holding them and identifying them
Absolutely.
as a part of our community.
Absolutely.
And a part of our future. And so, how do we get to the place where the wisdom and discernment that you talked about, that we can actually use it to learn from each other, but also from young people?
Yes.
Absolutely.
God gives them
Yes.
with tremendous things as well. And then how can we impart some of that wisdom and knowledge of community and then to them and with them in a cup that they can drink out of,
Right.
that is not judgmental or does not feel negative to them,
Yeah.
but supportive and uplifting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's super important because nobody wants to be part of a community where they don't feel supported and uplifted. In other words, they're not part of that community, right? So, and I think some of the young ladies identified that they didn't say Black community, one, because we don't have Black neighborhoods anymore, right? And so that was one of the things. And then they didn't know how to define Black community outside of the anger, outside of fighting against something, fighting against white violence and murders on Black people and those kind of things. But defining it in the other ways of the other communities that they were part of, it didn't make sense to them. And so then the question is, how do we, each one of us, take responsibility for creating community, right? Because we often won't agree 100% on anything.
Absolutely.
But can we agree to some basics?
Mm-hmm.
You know, love, respect, we'll just agree to disagree. And we'll fight together on this and not so much on that, right? And like, can we have some community rules of engagement, right? And how you go from being a girl to a woman, how you go from being a boy to a man. Because I can tell you, and this is me a little on the side here. Some of the young ladies that I work with, right, and I work with over 1,000 of them, they complain about their relationships with the young men, right? And then I said, but you're complaining about a relationship that you want to have with a man, but it's a boy. You can't have a relationship with a boy and expect him to act like a man. And first, you have to be a woman, you know? And so we have those real conversations, right? As part of our global conference, we did a virtual slumber party and we got into the stuff. We got into all the stuff. And that's important. And they came, it's virtual. None of them had to show up to a slumber party, right? But they came and we were all in our pajamas and eating pizza wherever we were. And it was building community, right? One that they knew, loved, and supported them, that they could be in regardless of how they showed up.
Absolutely. I love where the conversation is going. I kind of wanted to Black business leaders, being that you are an entrepreneur as well, and I say that with the utmost respect because I don't think we give people their roses enough, right? I think you start to look at people for what they do, and it just becomes a tag. And then you don't see the 17 other things that they're doing because it's like there's just one that's forward facing. Similar to Brother Jeff, you know, I give you your roses because not only do you make it easy for people to understand what community is, but you're accessible. And that is key, being accessible. You know, being an open ear, being a resource, at the same time, being a leader. And I think that's most important. And so I say this, as far as business goes and what you do in business, I understand that you kind of keep it all revolving, but how do you stay intentional about like what's most important as far as business goes? Because I just feel like just us as Black entrepreneurs, we get like that, right? Where it's just, I have this idea, I have that idea, I have this. And then you become like the little the squirrel on Ice Age, right? Where it's like that little nut is jumping all over the place, and you're just trying to scramble and get it, and you forget about what the actual path is. So how do you stay intentional with?
So one, I would say my daily prayers and stuff help me stay intentional because I ask every day to be aligned with what God has for me, period, but especially in that day. But I think saying yes to the things that matter and saying no to the things that don't. And some people actually feel like they need to say yes to everything, and you don't. And if there are things that are time wasters, if there are things that are energy wasters, brain drainers, I will usually ask someone else to do that, or just won't get done. And oftentimes, unfortunately, my family and whoever I'm working with on whatever project, because I have the girls program, I have the nonprofit, and then I have the Black Home Ownership Project. And so like there are lots of people involved in all those places. And so God has given us specific gifts and talents. And so we need to lean into those because those are things that no one else can do that are involved in our purpose, right? But there are other things that other people can do, right? And do them well. They may not do them just like we do them, but they can still do them well. And so that's when it's, okay, Chris, I need you to take care of communications. I need you to, because I got to go meet with these people to explain what I'm actually doing. And I'm the only one who can really do that. And so really saying yes and having permission to say no.
Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that. Do you have a question?
I do.
Yeah.
Another question in reference to what you were talking about just now. How have your private relationships helped developing your businesses? Because I know that has been a very strong challenge in my life.
Okay.
As I developed multiple businesses, but the struggle has always been relationships.
So when you say the struggle is relationships, can you share a little bit more about what that means?
Sure.
Whatever you feel comfortable with, of course.
Yeah, maybe a little bit vulnerable. So what I found is, like you said, not coming from a strong community, coming from community, but the neighborhoods where they used to be, at least what I know. Like, I'm the 80s baby. So, the community was mostly a black church and like you said, we didn't see a lot of strong excellence in things that were connected with that. So, for instance, relationships. I see that you are happily married with children, right? I imagine that plays a strong foundation to building. I know it plays a strong foundation to building black wealth, legacy, and other things, but also support, right? And not being able to have that in my own life. I see how difficult, how efficient things can be, because just a little bit of support, it will make a tremendous amount of difference.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so, yes, all those things you just said, what is it? Praise God and amen. Yes, I agree 100%. Definitely having a strong marriage. And I thank God for this every day, for my marriage and my kids, and for peace in my home. Because peace in my home allows me to go fight, right? To go do, to expand. And because as a Black woman in America, everything I do is a fight, right? And so if I didn't have love and peace in my home, where I knew when I laid my head down, everyone is okay, we love each other, we support each other, we're there for each other, whatever comes, it would be a lot harder to do anything that I'm doing, despite, regardless of the 50 million things that I'm doing, but any of those one things would be more challenging. But what I can say for those people who don't have that, when you are centered, aware, and ready, the door will be opened for those relationships that you need. And they will be timely. The key will be, are you aware of them? Because a lot of times they're right around us. My husband and I was in the same circle for years and never met. He was in a wedding I was supposed to be in. His niece was in a program that I led, like, right? But we weren't ready.
He knew.
And the thing is, if we'd have gotten together earlier, it might have been a shipwreck, right? As old school, I'm 60s baby.
Mhm.
You know, it might have, because would not have been ready yet. We didn't experience all the things to make us grateful for each other, right? And so sometimes we're not ready for that door to be open yet. So the focus should be getting yourself ready for that dream that you have. How do you position your heart, your mind, your soul, and your body to be ready when those doors open? Because if you're ready, like, you will see things that you never thought you could see, and some of them have always been there and just never saw, because it was too many other things in the way, even starting with yourself, like your own mindset, right? And even being here today, there's some word that you needed. So there you go.
Absolutely. I want to give
Thank you
everyone
for that question. I hope you.
I hope I want to be intentional about leaving some time at the end for like actual questions, but I really want you to. I mean, you started off by saying, you know, South Side of Chicago. But, you know, like, what were some experiences that you went through that made you take the path of social work? What was some of the experiences that made you say, hey, like, I want to get out of this. Like, I want to be intentional about getting out of this, because I think that's a lot of things that we go through, right? Like, I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. People hear Connecticut and the first thing they think is like, it's this rich state. And it's like, Connecticut has 3 of the poorest cities in the entire country per capita.
Any black people live there.
And that's but
we have family there.
Exactly. But it's like, you have to know. So when I first moved to Denver, that was the thing. It's like, where are the black people at?
Right.
Where are the black people at? Yeah. And it's like, you have to go look for it.
Right.
You had to go search. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things now where, what was it for you? Because I know what it was for me, right, but what was it for you that said, I have to change dynamics? Like, I have to take not only the road less traveled by, but the intentional road. Yeah. The one where, and I look at everyone in here, right? Like, how do you want to change something for your family, for your lineage? Mm-hmm. Do you want to be the first millionaire? Do you want to be the first, educated? I was the first person in my family to graduate college and high school. So, I mean, that was big for me, but it wasn't. Because I walked across that stage and I was like, all right, what's next? Yeah. What's next for me? So, for anyone who's struggling in business, anyone who's struggling in life, what was your intention?
So I was going to school to be a lawyer. I wanted to fight injustice. She's looking like, okay. I wanted to fight injustice. I mean, I grew up on the South Side of Chicago, Inglewood. Like, half the young men were in jail, right? And their girlfriends was right behind them, right? And I would have been one of them. And so I was going to college to be a lawyer. I went to college, University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. Well, first of all, I had a black man teacher say to my mother that I would not be successful in college. Okay. And one of my white, actually, she might have been my only white teacher in high school in Chicago, said to him, she gonna make it. Like, she went off on the brother. And if she has struggling, I'll help her. So don't count out all white folks. She was one of the good ones,
Absolutely.
And so I kind of was like, it was kind of a, can I do this? Yes, I can do this, right? And so I went to school to be a lawyer because I wanted to fight for justice, liberty, in the American way. And I applied myself. So I joined the Minority Association for Future Attorneys. And actually, in college, I ended up raising my youngest brother, because he was having some problems in Chicago. So my mother shipped him off to live with me. Of course, this was after she kicked me out of the house, but that's an aside. And so he actually shot somebody with a BB gun. He was only 10, I think, at the time. And so I had to take him in to the facility for an adjudication, they called it. And they offered me a job.
Wow.
So when you say ready for opportunity, and I didn't go looking for a job. I was taking my brother to keep him from jail, right? And I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, what they saw, but God prepared that door to be open. Because I was full-time college student, raising a 10-year-old, and I was working several jobs and going to school. And of course, I needed the money of a juvenile detention officer. That was much better than Wendy's. And so I got to really dig in to see what being a lawyer would be like. And actually, I had some judges and attorney mentors, community, who actually said I would end up an alcoholic or drug addict. I know, right? How you gonna say that to a sister? I did all this work to get here.
It's the career path.
Right. And so they said, because you are passionate, you want to change things. You want them changed today, not tomorrow. You're going to be frustrated, right? And you're going to turn to a substance to help with your frustration. I was like, dang, they think low of me now. But I think some of them was already, doing stuff. So they knew the path that I was on. And so it really opened up my world to what can I do then? If this thing, I wanted to be the Black woman Perry Mason. That was my goal, right? I still watch Perry Mason every night. But anyway, and so I started searching for what else I could do. And I don't even know how I ended up with the major for human development and family studies, which is a combination of social work, psychology, and education. So it's a combination. And so ended up with that degree, then going back some years later to get master's in mental health therapy, certificate in school counseling, and then doctorates in educational leadership and a superintendent endorsement. And I say that, and that all praise due to the Father.
I mean, and this is what I'm talking about as far as, South side of Chicago. And this is what I tell everyone, when you are, it doesn't matter what surroundings you're in. It doesn't matter, as long as your brain doesn't stay where you are.
Yes.
You should always have that thought process of everything is better and I can make it better.
Yes.
And my vision and everything that I thought about was always bigger than Hartford, Connecticut, right? I always wanted more. I always saw better. I tell people this, I'm from Hartford, but Hartford isn't me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're Chicago, but Chicago isn't you. You know what I mean? Like, you have some in you. Don't get me wrong. You can bring it out of me. But no, and I think that is important, right?
Yeah.
Always think and dream bigger.
And not let our surroundings define who we are, but define our surroundings.
Absolutely.
Actually, because we should be the ones who change the temperature in the space.
Absolutely.
Right. And we don't always change the temperature by talking, being the center of speaking. Sometimes it's just our quiet demeanor. It's just holding space and even sitting there and sometimes praying for people in the space.
Absolutely.
Right? Changes the temperature, changes the future of the people around us. And that's been who I've been my whole, as
Absolutely.
far as I talked to some family members because we had a funeral, and I'm sure most of us are familiar with these times where people are, we're losing people. And I asked them because, when you're a child, it's kind of like drinking. You don't remember anything, you have a blackout. People have to tell you what you did. So I asked my family, like, what was I like as a child? Right? Because they knew me, they were there. And they were like, you were quiet, but when you spoke, like, everybody paid attention, even as a toddler, they said, because you were observing everything that was going around. And they knew when I spoke, it was to kind of check them, hold them accountable for their behavior or like change what was going on in the space.
So it was always your path.
It kind of was.
Always your path.
It kind of was. I didn't know that though. So it's nice to have that validation and affirmation.
Absolutely. So I want to open up, we have about, 6 minutes. I want to open up to some questions. I know that everyone is, they have careers, also have ideas, but I think what we don't do and what we're not intentional about is home and work-life balance, right? And that's something that I really wanted to get in and have you guys ask questions, because what is it that holds you back? What is it that you bring home? I had a little cousin who worked at McDonald's, And, you know, she was just always so stressed out. And I'm like, what is it that the deep fryer can get you mad? Like, how is it, you know, how is it that the French fries can get you that mad? Like, and I would tell her, like, when you leave those golden arches and you get home, it's home. And I think sometimes what we don't do and we're not intentional about is leaving work at work.
But how, as a business owner, I can't do that.
And
that's not possible. And when you own your own business, it's like you really never off work. I think that you have to figure out ways of taking care of yourself so that you don't burn out, and you balance that. Because at McDonald's, she should be able to leave and not be stressed about work. That's for sure. And most workplaces, that should be the case. But when you own your own business, it's not the same. Mm-hmm. You really, I don't want to say you can't turn it off, but you're the one responsible for everything, regardless of whether someone else is doing it. You're still ultimately responsible for it. And so it's really just finding ways to take care of yourself and manage that level of stress. Absolutely. Because it's a level of stress, unlike going into work, doing a time clock, and punching the time clock and leaving. You're always thinking about growth and movement and impact to the community, and all these things are constantly in the universe of your brain. Mm-hmm. Right. So
do we have any questions? Anybody?
You want time to relationships, right? And I thought it was really interesting that when I take a survey of business owners and I look around the room, if there's 20 of us or 15 of us, I would tell you that 99% of us are divorced, never married. And so to me, that says there's something inherent in being a business owner that limits your success for that relationship. Right? I mean, and there's stressors that we just talked about that are beyond. You can't leave it anywhere else, and you have to figure those ways out. And what I'm saying is, I don't have the answers for it, but I do know that
you recognize the problem.
You do recognize it, and you see that. And I think some of the things that we're talking about are very important. And the reason why we're doing this type of work, because as entrepreneurs, as business owners, I think we have a different level of stress that goes along with it, and we more than anybody need to be able to deal with that.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that I'd just like to share was, you're talking about why don't we go to therapists, right? And so when I talked to some of my other colleagues, I was in this meeting, and 100% of them, there were 10, I was number 9, they all had coaches. They all had people who they were dumping their stuff on. Mm-hmm. And so they
were serving the same purpose.
And they could be cool, right? So I can come to you and I can go for my hour, and like I said, I hate my husband today, and and I can't stand it. It's like, thank you. And then they can go, right? Whereas I didn't have that. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm looking for that place to dump my stuff, right, I'm going to dump it on my partner. Mm-hmm. Because that's the closest place to me, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put that on him. And he's going to try to come and help me, right? Because that's what his nature is. He's going to try to come and help me. And now we got ourselves in this whole thing where both of us are all messed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're trying to
and we mad at each other because he can't help.
Those walks help, though.
Those walks get lost.
Yes.
No, absolutely.
So
that's a real thing.
It is. And I feel for you, my brother, because you want to be in a relationship with folks, right? You want to. But there are just parts of being an entrepreneur that I think it's the stress of the finances, it's the stress of working with other people,
everything,
all of that done, that it doesn't leave a whole lot of time for them.
And the stress of a dream too, because sometimes the people in your life don't understand and they don't see it the way you see it, and sometimes they can be the wet blanket on your dreams and not the support, and so then that adds more stress, right? Because you're already struggling financially because you're trying to do it, with limited resources, just as Black people typically. And so all the regular stresses of the finances, the being stressed out all the time, that impacts everything in your life. And then if they also don't believe in your dream or don't know how to support you in that, then that adds a whole another level. And so one of the things, I was sharing this with one of our partners in Florida, because he's married and his wife doesn't get him, right? And I said, my husband doesn't always see the dream as I see it. But what he has learned to do is trust that God lives in me and that he will guide me, because I constantly center myself in God. And he's also seen me be so successful in following the Lord's leading that he trusts even though he can't see, right? And so that's super helpful. And he was like, so that means I don't have to get divorced? I was like, don't lose her, don't leave her, you know. As long as she's not a wet blanket on your dream, pray for her, you know, encourage her. God didn't make her the way he made you. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean she's deficient. It just means she's different. Yep. And my husband is so supportive of me. I'm glad he's different. Because if we had two stressed out people in the house, always like on, you know, everything. Look at that. Why is that there? We got to get that. Let's ship this out. We would drive each other crazy, right? And we know that. He's even taught my children. My kids say, Mom, I hope I marry a man like Dad, because he teaches us about your trauma. That's He's like, because he'll say, now, you know, if you leave that's going to drive your mama crazy. Because, you know, when she was a kid, that's how that would happen. And it would just, you know, so he helps even our children help me, right, to stay sane.
Absolutely.
Right? One thing I just want to say, because I know we're short on time, is have you documented any strategies around success any place?
That's so funny. So that would be my cheerleader. I wrote a book on this stuff. So literally, I wrote a book on it. It's called Trauma and Post-Secondary Success. And I actually wrote a book about it because I got tired of educators blaming kids' trauma for them not being successful. And because I've led schools where West Oakland, if you all are familiar with Oakland, actually, that's where the young man in the movie was, in West Oakland. Mm-hmm. And the trauma that just occurs in that space. And so we had some practices that I used that I led the team through.
Can you shout the book out one more time?
Trauma and Post-Secondary Success is actually on my website. You can order one, Higher Learning U, which will save you about $20 off of Amazon. That's a whole nother story. But it is on Amazon. All you have to do is type in Dr. McCoon, and it's there. But it has tons of practices, even like starting with yourself. And it's not just for schools and organizations, it's even to young people. So it's like for a young person, how do you understand what's going on with you, and also become a leader in your community for teaching other people how to manage their own trauma?
Absolutely. I want to take this time to not only thank you guys for being here, but also thank Brother Jeff for this space. Black Dollar Saturdays is in association and in partnership with Brother Jeff's Cultural Center. Like we said, this is a safe space. We want it to be a safe space, but bringing people like you, giving you your flowers, obviously you guys in the audience, the people watching, we can't move forward as a people if we don't talk about the past, if we don't talk about traumas, if we don't talk about things that we can do to kind of push ourselves to the forefront. My brother right here, just talking about relationships, like that's something that we don't do often. As men, we don't talk about how valuable women are to our lives and how to push us forward, because those relationships are important. But at the same time, there are traumas that we all deal with that don't necessarily allow us to bring those relationships to the next level. So understanding that you are a foundation, you are a king, you are, in yourself, there's so many things that you can do moving forward that can make everything around you better. So I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your honesty, your transparency, and I want to thank everybody else for being here. And, there will be, Black Dollar Saturdays moving forward will be broadcasted with more intention. And I think that was one of the reasons why we decided to make this one live and in person, because the world's opening back up. And I think we have to learn how to associate with each other again.
Ooh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So thank you guys. I appreciate everyone for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.